Welcome to Season 3, Episode 17 of the Be Conscious podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing the wonderfully talented Naomi Mellor. Here we go.
Welcome to the Be Conscious podcast, the show that brings you enlightened perspectives on the frequency of money, life's many challenges, and those heavy feelings that may be holding you back from living your best life. And now your host, Dr. Susan Nicholas.
Naomi Mellor is a multifaceted and multi-talented podcaster, presenter, entrepreneur, and veterinary surgeon. She is the founder of the Skylark Collective and the International Women's Podcast Awards. She's a passionate advocate of raising the voices of women in podcasting. The common thread running throughout Naomi's career is a passion for creating meaningful connections with others and serving those around her. She was raised with the idea that women and girls can step into their power and to do whatever they want in life. And it remains a particular goal of hers to share that idea with others. Her first podcast, Smashing the Ceiling, launched in 2018, telling stories of women with interesting, unusual, and inspiring stories. In 2021, Naomi combined her passions for podcasting and promoting the interests of audacious, confident women worldwide, founding the Skylark Collective and the International Women's Podcast Awards. Naomi, welcome. Welcome to the Be Conscious podcast. Have I missed anything?
No, Susan, thank you so much. It's absolutely delightful to be here. As you guys can probably tell from my accent, I'm based in the UK. And yeah, I absolutely love chatting to other women. I've been having a listen to your podcast. There's so many inspiring women and other guests that you've been speaking to, Susan. So it's an absolute joy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to come on. I believe we met in a clubhouse room, and I was very, very inspired by your transition. And I speak a lot about life transitions in my podcast. And you certainly have an interesting path. And I think you and I recognized early on that we had some commonalities in our journey, that I trained as a surgeon, a cardiothoracic surgeon, and had a spiritual awakening or conscious awakening. And now I do my conscious work. I mean, it wasn't like a direct path, but here I am now into my conscious work. And you've had an interesting career too. And I wanted to go back and, I love to start with my guest because I want our listeners and I want to know you better. So Naomi, can you take us back to your life, how it all started, and bring us into today? Like, who were you as a little kid? Where did you grow up? What were the key kind of triggers or shifts? And then what brings us to speaking here today?
Well, thank you, Susan. I think you and I do have a lot of commonalities in our careers, and it's something that I see a lot with the women that I chat to on my own podcast, Smashing the Ceiling, which is about women's careers. And I think this idea that often our careers can be a bit squiggly is one that I'm really embracing these days. I'm from the north of England. I grew up in Cheshire, which is near Manchester. For those people who like sports, you've probably heard of Manchester United. They play soccer. And I had a very wonderful childhood. I'm so fortunate. I have two very loving parents and a really wonderful family. And I decided very early that I wanted to be a veterinarian. So my mum tells the story that when I was 3, we were on a farm and I was allowed to hold a lamb because it was lambing time in the British spring. And I said, Mummy, I'm going to be a vet, as all kids do. And my parents, I think, assumed as with most people who declare they want to be a veterinarian when they're a child, that it would be a phase. And the short version is that when I was 15 years old, I was still saying that that was what I really wanted to do. We'd had animals when I was a child. We always had dogs in our house. And my parents kind of allowed me to nurture all manner of animals when I was a kid. And so they really kind of encouraged my dreams, I suppose. And I think you mentioned in the introduction, Susan, that I was raised with this idea of women being able to do whatever they wanted. And that is definitely something that I would credit my mom and my grandmother for. My grandmother passed away a couple of years ago when she was 102. She was a couple of weeks off her 103rd birthday. And she is someone who was very important in my life. She had quite an adventurous life herself, and she was a teacher. And when she got married at the time in the 1940s, most women gave up work and she didn't. And even after she had my mum, she went straight back to work. And she then lived abroad for a while and taught abroad. And she was a big influence on me. And people told me, probably a bit like you, Susan, getting into veterinary school is hard. It's a really difficult degree. It's really competitive, yada, yada, yada. And I just always knew that this was what I was going to do. And I guess I just never really had any doubt. And I know you love talking about kind of mindset and conscious thoughts. And that decision was just so ingrained in my brain from such an early age that it was almost never in doubt for me. And I realized that I say that coming from a place of extreme privilege of having a great education and a loving, supportive family. But yeah, I was fortunate to get into veterinary school on my first attempt, and I went off to Edinburgh University. It's a beautiful city, and I spent 5 years studying up there to become a vet. And I guess I was one of those kids who I just was always waiting for the next thing, Susan. Wherever I was in my life, I was always ready for the next thing, whether that was the next goal, the next challenge, the next sports game. I just always wanted to be older, and I wanted to be doing the next thing that was on my list. I guess you would probably maybe relate to that. And yeah, that was very much kind of how I lived my early life up until I got through university and kind of came out the other side, really.
Naomi, you have to, for us on the other side of the pond, you have to digress a little bit and tell me what lambing season is. Is that when you, eat lamb, slaughter lamb, raise lamb?
So that's when on a sheep farm, the lambs are born. So in spring, that would be when all the mommy sheep or the ewes give birth to their babies. So for us over here, it happens in springtime. So that is kind of April, May, just when the weather's starting to get warm. It's kind of seen over here as like a big changing of the seasons from winter into spring. And a lot of people would associate seeing little lambs in the fields. You can imagine it's very kind of quaint and countryside in the UK, Susan. You see lots of kind of beautiful grass fields and little lambs kind of coming out. And it's really viewed as like a bit of a time of changing of the seasons in the UK. And I think a lot of people see that. It's usually around Easter for us.
Oh, good. Okay, that makes my heart feel better, because when I think of people that grow up on farms, or at least what I've heard, I did not grow up on a farm, so I can't speak too much into this. There's the other side of the farm, where the animals maybe are eaten or bought and sold or whatnot. And I thought, oh my goodness, when you come in from a place of maybe farming, animal farming, when you said I went into veterinary, I didn't know if it was to save the animals or to, was your thought as a young child, if you can remember back, was it to, just be a carer, like almost a support for the animals? I
think so, yeah. And I really, I was good at science, and I kind of liked the idea of working with animals. I really wanted to work with animals from a young age. And I just think I had this quite romantic notion of what being a vet was all about, to be quite honest. And, when people now come to talk to me, and I love working with young people, when people come to talk to me about going to veterinary college, like I say to them, it's only about 10 to 20% about the animals. And it's something that you don't think about when you're young. You think your life is going to be this wonderful kind of healing of the animals, helping the animals, making them better, utilizing your kind of scientific knowledge, practicing surgery, blah, blah, blah. And actually what it's all about, a bit like being a doctor, it's all about communication. It's about your relationships with people. It's about how you handle the owners. It's about money. And it's about, there's so much more than just looking after the animals. And I think the reality is that I had quite a romantic notion of what being a veterinarian would be. And it's quite different to that. And I think that's a common theme of a lot of people who go into a vocational job. And I think it's a major flaw of how careers are taught, certainly in the UK in schools. And I think it has changed a little bit. But I think we often have people who decide they want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a veterinarian, a journalist, whatever. And you think it's going to be something when you're in your teenage years. And actually, it is quite different to that. And I think that gap still kind of hasn't been traversed in a lot of careers, to be quite honest, Susan.
I would agree with you entirely. And I was probably a little older than you when I first declared to my family and myself that I was going to be a doctor. And of course, it's my image of it was what I saw on television, or in popular culture. Same thing. They have, even, today, they have lawyer shows and doctor shows and journalist shows and policeman shows. And you get this idea, like this romanticized idea of what it is, but often it's not. Or there's so much other stuff entangled in it that we become, I don't want to say disgruntled, but dismayed maybe in it. And we recognize that it's not sustainable.
Absolutely. And that is a big thing. I know it's the same in the medical profession, but, the reality on the ground is that there is a lot of veterinarians suffering from burnout. We have very high suicide rates. There are a lot of people leaving the profession. It's hard. And actually, it's something that you just don't really get told when you're at school. And even when when you're in college, I, as a student, I was so thrilled to be going out on placements, to be working with vets in practice, to be learning. I was just like a sponge for knowledge. I loved it. And, I couldn't wait to go and get out there and be practicing. And I think even when I was on my placements in my final years, you're still shielded from the stress and the reality of the hours, the phone calls, the pressures, the complaints, everything that comes with being a medical professional of any kind. And I think that is a difficult transition, I think, when you go into your first job for anybody. And it wasn't, I was very fortunate that I was well looked after in my first job. And actually I worked with a bunch of people I already knew. And so I had a great time, but that's not the same for everybody. And I think that transition into your first working role can be really difficult, whatever job you're in. But I think certainly with doing on-call hours made that really hard.
You said something, Naomi, that, we're not told the reality of it. And this is just a thought. Do you think that if we were told, like if we were young children or college students and whatnot, high school students and professionals from our respective, desires, medical professionals, lawyers, whatever, doctors, any physicists, whatever we're aspiring to be, actors, said, hey, this is the reality of it, kids. And then kind of went down the line. Would it stop us? You said something to me. You said, I had an inner knowing. I never thought otherwise. You said you had no doubt that this is what you were meant to do. Do you think knowing or being told the reality would have changed that? Because I think part of us would not want to believe it. And we would say, no, I know, like almost like this is my purpose. And like, this is what I am to do. And perhaps it is, Naomi, like all of it, even the difficult parts, the part that burns us out, the parts that puts us on the brink of life and death, that suicide part, I had that experience. that we need all of those experiences, all of it.
I think that is
What are your
really true.
thoughts?
And I think that is very true. And to say that I never had any doubts is not strictly true, Susan. I did. One of the other things I loved have always loved is writing. And as a little kid, I used to write books. I used to write stories. And it's quite unusual when you go to vet school. Like I had studied English in my final years of school, which is quite unusual for veterinarians over here because most people are very science focused and would be taking kind of science as their majors in high school. And I love that. And there was a wobble point when I thought, I don't want to do this. I want to be a writer. Like I want to go and study English literature as my major at university. And I was so far down the road by that point that everybody said to me, you're crazy. You can't throw away everything you've worked for the last 5 years or whatever it was. And I didn't. And I stuck to the path I was on. But I think came from within me. I think if anyone had told me that I couldn't do it, that I wouldn't like it, that it would be really hard, I think you're right that I wouldn't have listened to them. I think that I would have been so... I just would have been on my path with blinkers on. And, I don't really like other people telling me what to do. I never have. I was quite a stubborn child. I just think if you'd have tried to tell me that I couldn't hack it or that it was going to be too difficult, that just would have made me more determined to be like, no, it's fine. I can cut it. I will be I will be fine, And I think you're right that I felt that being a vet was my purpose. I think a lot of vets, and it's probably the same as a lot of doctors that a lot of veterinarians have wanted to be a vet since they were tiny. It's so common.
Yes.
Like loads of people have wanted to do that for their whole lives. And I think that there is that kind of purpose, vocation, calling, whatever you want to call it. And I think that is common. And I think you're right that lots of people would not be put off even if people tried to tell them that the reality might be different to the vision. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I view it differently now. And I view my career very differently now to how I did when I was 18. When I was 18, if you'd have asked me what I was doing when I was 37, I would have told you that I would be like a high flying, highly qualified, veterinary surgeon, owning my own business, running a team of other vets, speaking at conferences or whatever I thought I might be doing, which is not what I'm doing now. And, it's kind of, I viewed it as a profession for life is the point that I'm making, I guess. And I thought that when I was 18 to 23 years old, that this was going to be what I did for the rest of my career because that is what I had seen. And actually now I just view my career a bit like you as being a kind of series of choices. It's not a ladder where I'm on a race to the top and I'm going to tread other people down in order to get there. It's a winding path with crossroads and forks. And sometimes you can't see the way you're going in the woods. But do you know what? There's lots of surprises along the way. And to extend the metaphor, the woods are a great place to hang out. There's loads of adventures, And so I kind of view it like that now. I don't see myself as being on a straight road. I see myself as just taking this kind of winding, exciting, adventurous path.
Exactly. I call this, we have different names for it. You called it squiggly and I call this like a circuitous path. Like it takes us all around. Sometimes we don't know which direction we are facing. And sometimes it feels confusing. And I think we don't, I don't know if it's that we don't think that as young people that we would lose hope. But for some reason, we feel that we cannot speak the truth to our children. But I'm noticing in this generation, I have a child who is 11 years old, and he is beginning to look at life almost like the post stressed out person, adult that says, wait a second, this isn't working, or that I don't want to do that. His father and I are both physicians. We trained differently. His father's an emergency room physician. I'm trained as a surgeon. And both of us, when we had our son, said we wouldn't encourage our child to follow our path. And that what was most important for us as his parents and for him is that he finds whatever it is that makes him happy, like that he's actualized in life. And so I think this generation, the Generation Zs, he butts right on the Generation Alphas. He's still in elementary school. That I think they don't want to do this anymore. What we did. I'm sure there are some people that want to be astronauts and all this stuff. That's great. But I think, they're starting to see that, my son said this to me. He said, Mommy, I look at the grownups and they don't look happy. They're just working and working.
He's very perceptive.
Oh, yeah. I think I don't know if for better or worse or sadness or whatever, maybe we can look at the pandemic and point a finger. But, there have been a lot of children with suicidal ideation. And my son said that he looked at the adults, looked around him and didn't want to become one. And it reminded me of that story of the Little Prince. If you've seen that one, yes, by Antoine Saint-Exupéry. And he taught the Little Prince, says, about growing up, this idea that we get all serious and we do only what is essential. And we forget to play and imagine. And it's not fun anymore. It's hard work. And I wonder, Naomi, if that is just a story that we tell ourselves, like a belief, a construct, that's how it has to be. And maybe it isn't true at all. And the fact that many of us that go into these challenging careers are ultimately dissatisfied. And, same thing, we have a very high suicide. It's not it's not spoken about a lot, but from medical school to residency, into the professions, we have a very high suicide rate in the medical community. There's a lot of secrecy and a shroud of shame around that, unfortunately. So it's not spoken of, but it's known within. And I assume, similar for other types of careers, whether it's, be law enforcement or law or, whatever. I don't think it matters. I think it's that we lose this part of us in the pursuit of professionalism where we no longer are light, and it's very rigid. And like you said, it's about money. It's about the relationships. And we haven't learned how to manage all that, right? Like, we learned like the laws of the physical world.
And
but we don't learn well about relationships, about money, about ourselves.
Yeah. And I think what you said there about thinking that this is the way it has to be is the difference between the generations as I see it. And my parents, as I said, were wonderfully supportive, but they were people who were comforted, I think, by a paycheck and by a stable job. And,
yes.
My father is a dentist and he worked in academia his whole life in a university or for a large part of my life anyway. And my mom was a teacher and then changed careers and had her own business. But they encouraged me and I think were comforted by my security through having a professional job that was very secure. And I think that there is a lot of societal expectation and a lot of kind of societal pleasing that comes through having a profession like being a doctor or being a veterinarian, is that it's that thing you can say, people know what you do. You'll have a job for life. You've got that security. You've got that comfort. And I think as a parent, there's a lot of there's a lot of comfort in that, to see your child doing something that is good, wholesome, secure, well qualified, and something they can really be proud of. They can get behind you being a veterinarian.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they have been very supportive of my recent endeavors. But I think that and I don't think that either of them would mind me saying that, I don't think that they fully understand or have understood why I wanted to step away from the path I had been on, and I had several kind of chances or opportunities to leave being a vet at an earlier stage, and at various points and for various reasons they encouraged me to stay. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't blame them for that at all. I think they had my best interests at heart. But there were points when I said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a master's. I'm going to leave my job and I want to do this. And, they both said, whoa, just hang on, sit tight. You've got a good job. Don't be too rash. And actually, I think that reaching past those kind of attitudes, that they may not come from parents, they might come from your friends, they might come from your colleagues, they might just come from internally within, to say,
society. I mean, we've all bought into it. Yes,
completely. And I think you can become trapped, not through any malicious means or not through anybody having a view that is not, right in their own eyes, but just thinking they're doing great, and actually then people can be in a position where they think they can't do anything else, and they don't leave what they're doing because of everybody else's view that you are doing great. And I think that can be a difficult position to be in. And I think grappling with that, whatever career you have and whatever you do, can be really difficult. And I think, we talk a lot about consciousness on this podcast. And I know, you have to make a conscious decision to back yourself to say, I'm going to be okay. I can do something different. I can transfer my skills. I have loads of skills. I might not have loads of qualifications on paper other than being a doctor or a veterinarian or whatever, but it's going to be fine. And I think that takes a lot of courage, and it can also take a lot of grappling internally and really, mentally kind of challenging yourself to make that choice and to make that realization. And that took me a really, really, really long time. So anybody listening to this, it didn't happen overnight to me. And I'm sure it didn't happen overnight to you, Susan, either,
Not at all. You said a couple of things that I wanted to kind of touch on. You talked about security, about the jobs that we take, maybe the education that we accrue, kind of those lines on our resume or CVs, that security. And that brings me to this concept, if you will, of this inner world and the outer world. So we have the outer world, which is all that stuff, like, secure degrees, jobs, paychecks, society, like paying bills, that kind of stuff. And then we have the inner world, like what's going on inside of us, like the feelings that are emanating from us, the intuition that's pinging us, the fears that we have, the courage or the lack thereof. That's our inner world. And so what I see happening with these very, I would say, high academic, these careers, if you will, that are valued by our modern society today, is that there's a hyper focus on the outer world, on what things look like on the outside.
Totally.
And we give very little attention to what's going on within us. So, it's the same thing, your parents, your friends, even even ourselves, we'll look at all the outer stuff and say, well, what do I have to be sad about? Or what do I have to be dissatisfied about? Because we can't make the connection in like a logical sense. We think that if everything lines up on the outside, then I must feel great on the inside. But it actually doesn't happen that way, right? We go toward these external securities instead of the internal security. And what I mean about the internal security is being secure in yourself, believing in yourself, believing in, if you will, the universe, God, the spirit, whatever you want to call the higher aspect of you, that there's something else driving the bus. And there's a conflict because we'll feel one way, we have these feelings inside. Like you said, I knew that I wanted to do something else. There were times that I wanted to shift. I wanted to get a, different degree, learn something different. And I was told, no, hold on, stay the course. but inside you already knew. So that's another type of knowing, right? The one you knew, the veterinary one, and now you know something different. And I think in the constructs that we build in the world, they're so rigid that they don't allow us to shift. Not without a great deal of energy and a great deal of strife and pain and sorrow, it's like literally we will reach the brink like of existence of do I go on any longer doing this? And that there are many instances of that, there are internal instances and external instances of that, of us doing that. I think true security, Naomi, comes from being secure in yourself, like trusting in yourself, like the soul of you, that it may not look a certain way. And I think that's a part of it. It's like this idea of we feel like we can control the outcomes, like how this is all going to work out, how it should be, not how it is. And just like observing and being an observer of what is and following your heart, following your gut, like what's coming from inside of you, that those feelings, that direction that's coming from within you. And it is a quite difficult journey in letting all of that go and then trusting, like having the courage, as you said, to trust yourself, despite what anybody else thinks or believes.
I definitely agree with that. And I think the whole concept of intuition is something I, again, have been raised with. My mom is very intuitive. She's very kind of tuned in to other people. She sees things, she sees people, and I realize that to some people that might be quite a strange concept. But I have always been very led by what I would call gut instinct. And I think that has been very belittled by wider society and actually within the scientific community for a long time, Susan, as well, that this idea of there's no evidence for that. And actually I'm an evidence-based person. I'm a massive skeptic about so many things. I really am. And if you want me to do something or believe something or buy into something, I really have to be quite convinced. But one thing I do really realize is that sometimes you just know, and I don't really know why that is. And I can't give you a good scientific explanation, but whether it's coming from your kind of subconscious, your unconscious mind, through everything you've absorbed that you're not even aware of. And I do think that is a big thing. And I find the kind of neuroscience of that absolutely fascinating. But you do know, and call it gut instinct, intuition, whatever you like. It's very easy to ignore. You can tamp it down because of, like you say, the pressures of the outer world. But if you're not listening to your inner world, and I do think, again, it takes a conscious effort to tap into that. And it's something that I definitely have spent a lot of time on in the last year, that degree of personal development, to really lean into that. And kind of embrace the woo-woo, as it were. I previously would have been like, oh no, this is not for me. But actually it makes sense, and it's very powerful. It's very important. And I definitely completely agree with you that the outer world is not accepting of the inner world, but unless you're accepting of your own inner, you won't find true peace and get on the path you're meant to be on. That's my belief anyway.
Yeah, or happiness. And maybe this knowing, Naomi, I mean, I fought against this for a long time too, that there has to be evidence for everything. But maybe this knowing that we're speaking of is not based in science, or not based in the gray or white matter of the brain or in our nervous system. I think we have difficulty grasping concepts that do not belong to the physical world. And so one thing that I like to share, and this is something that I speak about a great deal on Clubhouse. I have a money consciousness room about healing your money story, that these beliefs and feelings that we have around money, which is really about our self-worth, about how we feel, what we feel worthy of receiving, can be based in our ancestral patterns. Like generational. We'll see poverty or lack or that energy of scarcity, carrying over generation to generation. And what we'll see in science is that we can accept that we inherit the genes, the physical genes making proteins of past generations. You have grandma's eyes, grandpa's feet, so-and-so's hair color. You can go back and go back and go back. And we're perfectly okay with that. We're like, oh, yeah. That's DNA. But what if we inherit more than our physical genes? What if we inherit the energy of past generations?
Yeah.
And for people that like science, I said, we understand, like we understand that there are universal, like there are laws of this life. Like we say, think of the law of gravity. We think of, the first law of thermodynamics, of energy. I speak about this a great deal, which is the conservation of energy. And we apply that to energy of the planet, electricity, which is not a physical thing, but other forms of energy on the planet as well. And so I think what we haven't done well, if you will, Naomi, is apply that energy, those laws of energy to us, like to the energetic, the soul of us, the spirit of us, the part of us that departs, the part of us that transcends or transitions when the physical body no longer lives. And there's all those cells and all that connected kind of, I don't know, osmosis, like all of the connections of the physical cells of the body cease en masse to go living, cease living en masse. But there's something that leaves, that's something that transitions. That and I call it, the energy that animates us. We know the difference when we are quote unquote alive and when we are not. But it's not because of the physical, like the physical remains, like we can see it, we can touch it, we can feel it, we can examine it, we can dissect it. It's still there, all of it. But what has shifted? And it's that energy, it's that part of us, the light in us, the consciousness of us, if you will, the sentientness of us, that part of us that can have awareness that I think we don't learn about. One will say that the true you is not the one speaking or even listening. It's the one that, that observes all of it, that is an awareness of that we're having a conversation and of our thoughts. And so it's the idea that there's a higher aspect of our beingness that we, I believe, in our high scientific fields, we lose sight of, or we're just afraid of it. We're afraid of it for some reason. We're afraid of crossing over into the realms of higher awareness.
Just what you were saying there, I really like that, Susan. And I think as someone who has, as you will have done, seen a lot of mammals, beings, animals, humans pass from life to death, that shifting of energy, I think, is something very real. And people say this thing of, you see the light go out in their eyes. And I know that that's kind of a metaphorical saying about, the fact that somebody has gone. But I do really believe in this kind of natural shifts of energy. Like, everything in the entire world is made up of energetic atoms at the end of the day. And,
yes.
I'm quite connected to the natural world as well. I spend a lot of time in the countryside. I feel very connected to nature. It's something that I find is a huge part of my life, my routine. Spending time outdoors is very, very important to me. And to me, everything is a natural cycle of shifting patterns of energy in the natural world. And I think part of that attitude comes from seeing life come into the world and seeing it go on an annual basis, whether that's animals, plants, trees, crops, anything that's coming and going. There's this kind of cyclical nature of energy of everything in the world. And for that reason, this is a bit of a kind of profound and strange thing to say, but it doesn't make me fear death, because having seen a lot of it, I know that we are just energy. We are made up of energy the whole time. And when we die, that will be transferred and will be utilized somewhere else in the world. And I find it really interesting in other religions, particularly in Buddhism, where they believe in the concept of reincarnation. And when you dig into that, it's transition of energy from one form to another. And that's I find that belief very comforting, and although I'm not religious myself, but that kind of discussion around that kind of transfer of energy, and the idea of being reabsorbed into the world and reappearing in nature in some form or another, to me is kind of amazing.
Yes. Well, I would agree, and I think we kind of went past our halfway point to run my mid-roll, but I want to do that. And I want to come back and shift a little bit on the transition that you made out of the hard sciences, out of veterinary, into what you are doing now. Like, what was it? I know there were lots of pings along the way, and I'm going to try something different, but we're going to talk about the shift. All right, stay with me.
Like what you're hearing so far, make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. How would you describe your relationship with money? Did you ever imagine that your deepest feelings and beliefs about money could be preventing you from acquiring all the wealth that you desire? Click the link below in the show notes to learn more about Dr. Nicholas's highly sought-after Frequency of Money program to positively transform your relationship with money. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
So, Naomi, you talked about making a shift into what you do now. And it has a lot to do with podcasting, of all things, So what was it? And what was it about podcasting? You said you were a writer, and I've read that you played the saxophone, you have a musical. It seems like a very creative side to you. How did we get here? How do we get to where you are? And please tell us exactly what you're doing with your International Women's Awards and the Skylark Collective.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's funny you say that I have a very creative side, because until probably the last 12 months, I would have categorically told you that I was not a creative person. And I would have really marketed myself as a scientist, despite the fact that I love writing. I always have. And my real strength as a vet, I've never said that I was the best veterinary surgeon in the world, but what I am good at is communicating with people. And that was my strength in practice, is client communications, client care, looking after the animals, looking after the people. But I reached a stage in 2018. My husband got a new job, and we had to relocate to another part of the country where I didn't know anybody. And I had to leave a job that I was very happy in. I was working in a very successful practice, actually with a guy who I knew from previously as a friend. I loved it. I was having a great time. And this good opportunity came up for my husband, and we decided between us to make a move, which having been a very selfish person with my career my whole life, I've been this is what I'm doing. You either come along or you don't. I've made my first kind of major sacrifice for him. And that was a big step for me. I've been a very independent, career-minded woman up until the age of kind of 34. And that was a huge move for me, to give up something that I was enjoying for the sake of somebody else. And, that's probably a whole other podcast season, to be quite honest.
Right.
But it's, we made this move, and I had to leave my job, and I was unemployed for a couple of months, and I couldn't find another position. And I really was just a bit stuck. And, I'd had a position in a practice where I thought I was going to be made a partner, and I wasn't for one reason and another. And I just felt very lost. I was kind of burned out. I'd worked really long hours. With the way it works in veterinary over here, and I specialize in horses, I was working with high performance race horses, competition horses, some people going to the Olympics, they have your cell phone number. I was constantly on the phone all hours of the day and night, answering people's problems, questions, helping them out, even if I wasn't necessarily out on the road. It was full on. And I guess as a practitioner, I'm empathetic. I give a lot of myself and I really care. And I was just finding that all kind of quite a lot, really. And so I had this point when we moved house where I was kind of a bit like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a job. I feel like my whole identity is in a bit of a crisis. I don't know how to do anything else. This kind of was what I kept coming back to. Like, I'm a vet. What else can I do? And so I decided, I found a part-time job, which is a job I'm still doing actually, where I work in horse racing. I'm very lucky. I have a great job working for British horse racing. And, I really enjoy that, but I couldn't find a full-time role. And I was somebody who was very motivated, very driven. So I decided at that point that I was just going to park my professional life for a little while, not worry about it too much. My role part-time was enough to cover my bills and support myself and my husband. And he has a good job as well, and it was fine. And so I thought, actually, I'm going to set myself some personal challenges instead. And I'm just going to stop pushing. I felt like all of my professional career in my 20s, and I'm sure you probably relate to this, is like I was pushing for more. I was constantly going for like promotion, more money. I was like working so hard to make myself better in every way. And I just thought, do you know what? You just need to relax a bit. And so I decided to do a couple of other things in my personal life that I'd been wanting to do. And I'd listened to podcasts since about 2014. Like so many people, Serial was the first podcast I ever listened to. And I really enjoyed listening to interview-based podcasts. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. My whole job is talking to people. I meet like 10 different people on a daily basis. A good clinical history is basically getting people to tell you their story. Like, I'm good at that. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. I'm going to give this a whirl. So I learned how to podcast. And at the same time, I've run for my whole life, and I'd never entered a big race before, and I entered an ultra marathon. And so I set myself these two kind of personal challenges, which was to launch a podcast and to complete an ultra marathon. And I enlisted the help of this incredible woman called Sarah Williams, who I owe a lot to. She is the CEO of an organization called Tough Girl in the UK, but it's a big international podcast and movement for women in adventure. And she's run several ultramarathons herself, and she's got this incredible podcast. And she helped me with both things. So she kind of mentored me, she coached me, she helped me with everything from kind of like the physical, the nutrition, all the way up to like how to make a podcast. And she really got me going on my road. And just having those two things that just took me out of my brain of driving and striving for what I perceived to be success just changed everything for me. And I think as well, everybody I met when I said like I'm running an ultramarathon and I've never even run a marathon before, which I hadn't, people just said to me, you're crazy. You are crazy. But again, I just had this knowledge in my head. I was like, it's going to be fine. I just knew it was going to be fine. And and the same with the podcasting. Like I just was like, I want to do this. I think it's going to be great. And so off I went. And I just did those two things from kind of middle of 2018 into 2019. I just let a lot of stuff go. And I just took on these new challenges that were completely unrelated to all of the pressures and stresses that I'd had as a vet. And that was kind of the start of my road, really, Susan, to be quite honest.
And may I ask you, Naomi, do you feel any less successful?
No. I mean, I feel sad in a way that I didn't have or haven't got the veterinary career that I thought I would. You know, I would have, but I'm very at peace now with the fact that, yes, I am still a vet at the moment. I may not be forever. I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Who knows? But you know, I practice and I still do a little bit of freelance clinical practice here and there. And I keep my hand in with that. I do a couple of days a week. I'm still working with horses. I get to work with kind of elite equine athletes. I love it. And, but I am very, I wouldn't say I'm resigned. I'm at peace with the fact that my
Yes.
skills lie elsewhere. And, I've always been a massive feminist. Although I wouldn't have called it that when I was young, I just thought girls could do whatever they wanted. And now I kind of realize that actually one of the things I love and that gives me real energy is supporting other people and seeing them thrive. And, really over the last few years, I had a lot of women come to me who saying, I want to start a podcast. Can you help me? And I was doing that more and more. And I was spending more time teaching people how to podcast and mentoring women starting on their own podcasting journey. And believe me, I've made a lot of mistakes, Susan. So it's kind of great to be able to help other people avoid that. And I just realized that there's a lot of women with incredible podcasts out there and incredible women who want to start a podcast and they need a place to go. And that was why I started the Skylark Collective. And off the back of that, rewarding those women who have produced amazing work through the International Women's Podcast Awards is something that has come about. And again, that has really snowballed from me having this kernel of an idea 6 months ago that I might have an awards ceremony to becoming a global event in September. If you'd have asked me a year ago, would that have happened? I would have said, again, categorically no. But I think being open to new things and I talk about being energetically open, which people may not be comfortable with that. But when you say yes to things, when you open doors, like things happen that you don't expect. And I just shifted my mindset away from this fixed idea of I'm only going to be a vet, I don't know how to do anything else, to let's see what's out there.
Anything's
Let's see who approaches me.
Yes.
Yeah. And all these doors and windows have opened to me that I didn't expect. But people recognize your talents if you allow them to and you show them what your skills are. And I don't have loads of pieces of paper. I don't have a degree in sound engineering. I'm not a professional radio producer. However, I have had experiences and what I know is how to support women and other people in doing the things that they want to do. And I think just acknowledging all of that has really kind of allowed me to take a different path and to take some winding turns, as you say, and end up where I am now.
Well, I think you said it. I think you found the keys, if you will, to what I think is inner happiness, like true self-actualization. You said, I stopped pushing, stopped forcing it, and I just let go. And in the letting go, of course, there's a surrender in like the fight and just being in flow, like allowing yourself to just be in flow with what is going to be, not fighting it anymore. You said, I had this knowing in my head, and I would wonder if this knowing was just in your heart. Like if we come down from the head space into the heart, this is where it comes from, like the truest of knowing. That alignment, when we align what's in our heart with what we're thinking. Like you said, what I'm speaking, you said, oh, I just said that, I'm going to let this happen, or I'm going to let it go. I'm going to be happy, I'm going to shift. I'm going to allow it. So we start to align our thinking. But I think this goes so much deeper than mindset. Yes, the mind is a part of it, but we must be meticulous with our language, how we speak, what we believe, what is emanating from our gut, from our heart center. When we are all in alignment with all of that, then we are truly empowered. We are in flow. We are in harmony with this universe of ours.
You are speaking my language. I love that. And I think that's so true. And, I've had a wonderful coach in the last year. And one of the things she talks about is this sweet spot between your professional and your personal. And I really feel now that my true place of flow is when I am aligning the professional skills that I have with the personal values that I hold. And my personal values are around nourishment, nurturing, collaboration. That is everything that I try to embody, because those are the things that are important to me. And I think, marrying those things together and allowing yourself to come to a place where you can be in a true flow because you are in alignment with the things that are important to you, that is a realization that not everybody will come to in their life. And that makes me quite sad. But actually having the privilege of having that realization and knowing that it's okay not to know where you're going, and when I was younger, I look back now, and my first job, I didn't mention this earlier, but my first job, I moved to the South Pacific by myself, and I lived on an island working as a vet for a charity for 6 months. And I didn't know anybody. I had no idea how that situation was going to pan out. And it was brilliant. And then a year or so later, I'd been home for a while. I then moved to Australia completely on my own again. I didn't know anybody. I moved to a place from a job I took over the phone. And, I just upped and left from the UK to Australia. And I had no idea what I was doing. But I look back on those now, and that kind of, I think getting yourself to a place where you can take safe risks and step into something that is the unknown is very exciting if you have the right mental attitude around that. And those things were situations that could have gone horribly wrong, but they didn't. And, I learned a lot. They were incredible jobs. I had amazing experiences. And it's with the same attitude and open heart that I'm stepping into organizing the International Women's Podcast Awards. Is this thing of, I don't really know how this is going to go. It's become a lot bigger. It's become a lot more exciting than I thought it might be. But it's that openness to situation and to adventure, I guess, that is how I try to live my life, and is something that I definitely try to kind of share and impart to others as well.
Well, I love what you're doing, and I'm so excited that you've stepped into your true power. Because this is what it's about. It's about that release of what we've been taught. It's a release of the worry of paying bills and titles and status. And it's coming into our true power. If you will, Naomi, will you tell us how to find you, how someone can learn more about your International Women's Podcast Awards, when they're coming up, and your website, if you'll just share your contact information with our listeners.
Yeah, of course, Susan. So the website is www.skylarkcollective.co.uk. And you can find details of the International Women's Podcast Awards on there, just under the awards section. The awards are taking place in London in September, but the entries are open now. So if any of your listeners have their own podcast, you can nominate yourself. In fact, we positively encourage people to put themselves forward, or you can nominate someone else. So do go to the webpage and have a look. You can find us online on Instagram at the Skylark Collective, and we are on Twitter at IW Podcast Awards. I absolutely love meeting new people, so do not be shy about sliding into my DMs or sending me an email, because if there's anything you want to talk about, or anyone who wants to start a podcast, I absolutely love helping people. So do reach out if you are interested in that. So that's me. And I'd love to hear from new people and to connect with your listeners, Susan. It would be great.
Well, thank you for that, Naomi. It has been a wonderful journey having this podcast interview with you today. And I want to thank our listeners for taking the inner journey with us today, and to remind you to be conscious. If you love this episode, and if today's message resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and review the Be Conscious podcast. I want to know what inspires you and what conscious topics you want to hear more about. And if you'd like, you can share your thoughts with me at info@susannicholas.org.
Thanks for listening to the Be Conscious podcast with author, TEDx international speaker, and conscious coach, Dr. Susan Nicholas. Be sure to connect with her to stay up to date with her latest news and works. Learn more about her conscious speaking platform at susannicholas.org/speaking. Stay tuned for the next thought-provoking episode. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious.